So I'm John, and I'm really excited to be giving this talk. Lee knows how many obstacles there have been to this talk, but finally I'm here, and I'd like to tell you a strange story, a story about a part of myself that I very almost lost, and the part that I'm currently on a path to regain once again. I grew up in a Christian family in a medium large city called Bristol in the southwest of England, not Wisconsin. That's where my story begins about a decade ago. In primary school, I was the kid that always had to be extra. I was so full of life and energy that I couldn't be stopped, and I could hardly be managed by my teachers. I got into trouble a lot for being the class clown. I saw myself as so special that when the teachers would say something like it was time to sit down and to do work, I assumed that they were talking to everybody else. I assumed that there was one set of rules for everybody else and a separate set of rules for me. A much shorter and more flexible set of rules. I also loved sticking my hand up in class and speaking about anything. And I noticed that even at a young age of about 10 years old, that whenever I spoke, the kids around me would just turn around to hear me speak. And this was before I had such a deep, commanding voice. You have to imagine for a moment a short, chubby, high-pitched version of the John that you're seeing on your screen right now. They would turn around because they anticipated that there was something worth listening to that John was about to say. And when I caught on to this only increased my confidence, and I would soak it up, all of this attention, to give the people what they wanted, me. Now, I almost wish I could say that things got better from here, but they didn't. It was around year 6 that without anybody telling me, I began to notice something strange about my speech, my way of talking. I realized that I often repeated sounds like this, especially when I got excited and had something I wanted to say quickly. My mom would tell me to slow down and to stop tripping over my words. Whenever I heard a comment like this, it was confirmation that I was doing something wrong, even that there was something wrong with me. The seed of self-doubt was planted. I noticed I was kind of different. Yeah, I didn't think much about it at the time because I had more important things to consider, like playing football in the yard and playing kiss chase at break time. Fast forwards to when I'm about 13 or 14 years old. I was in a PSHE class at secondary school. When I got into a disagreement with a classmate, let's call him Ed, because that was his name. In this disagreement, I got very excited and I wanted to prove my point, and I ended up tripping over my words and stuttering out my argument. I can't remember exactly what sound I stumbled on, but I remember getting mocked by this boy, and I was shocked that he would expose me in this cruel way. How could somebody be so mean? At this point, the seed of self-doubt began to germinate in my mind and to sprout shoots into the foundations of my self-conception. I already had the idea that something might be wrong. And when he hit on this nerve, it cut quite deep. In response to this attack, I retorted, "Don't be mean to me. It's not my fault that I have a stutter." I then threatened to snitch on him for bullying a boy with a stutter. At this point, he became embarrassed and fearful of getting told off, so he immediately apologized and backed off. And that's how I dealt with Ed. I felt as though I'd won the day because I'd shut him up with this bluff. But in hindsight, I'm not so sure that it was a victory. This was a significant moment in my journey because that was the first time I identified myself as a stutterer. The first time that I said those words out loud about myself, and the first time I really believed it. From that point onward, my speech consciousness, how conscious I felt about my speech, began to increase with each negative assessment of my interaction. Before long, I became very conscious of the way that I spoke. I didn't like to talk to people on the phone or send voice notes, or even to speak to people like friends and family. All of these suddenly became situations where I could be exposed in the same way that I did with, the same way that I was exposed with Ed, that same sort of shame that I felt. They all became potential sources of anxiety. And that innocent part of me who used to lavish in the attention of those who heard me speak became increasingly shackled by the fear of performance failure. Fast forward to university, though I ended up being quite popular and well known at uni for the various groups and activities I was involved in, the snowballing of my speech fears impacted my ability to form deep relationships with peers because I lacked the presentness of mind or the self-confidence to show my whole self around people. Even if I had what I deemed to be a successful conversation or interaction, the fear would remain that it wouldn't be long before they saw my speech impediment and rejected me, or at least thought less of me as a consequence. My third year of uni was my study abroad year. That's how I ended up in Wisconsin. And at this point, I'm living in America with fresh surroundings and a chance to reflect on life and to make some necessary changes. This is when I found and listened to the audible version of Lee's book. My Christian upbringing, my Christian faith had taught me that human beings are made in God's image and that they are by nature overcomers. I wasn't interested in accepting my stutter or learning to live with it, but in overcoming it. Therefore, when I sampled this audible book and heard Lee talking about self-curing with the power of the mind, I was very intrigued. In short, this book delivered on its promises. No gimmicks, no misinformation, no snake oil. Lee doesn't promise to cure anyone, but to help people to cure themselves. His book quickly taught me that this speech thing was not something beyond my control. This strongly accorded with what I believed to be true and was simply yet to experience. Like many of you, having completed the book, I Skyped with Lee and practiced the crutches, reading out loud and hearing fluency. But fundamentally, the biggest game changer for me was that it increased my belief that things could change for the better. Without this belief, I never would have attempted to change my circumstance, and things would have continued to snowball and continue to downward spiral. Seeing myself as an agent with the ability to do other and to choose better rather than as a victim was a real turning point for me. I still remember the excitement at the prospect of hope. This was when I began to see my problem as a challenge that I could overcome. This was when I saw a way to begin to dig out the seeds of self-doubt and any roots that had sprouted to establish themselves. Since Skyping with Lee, I've posted a success story, as was mentioned, I think, earlier on. and a much more condensed version of this long speech. Honestly, I must confess that since I've been quite inconsistent in applying these methods like auto-suggestions, as I was speaking to Lee about during our first meeting today, and reading out loud, I can do more of that. But I'm currently working on being more consistent on with these things as not to fall back into old habits. Though I still get nervous and feel anxious in certain situations, like at the start of this speech, I no longer identify as a stutterer, even though on occasion I might slip up. I don't know that she's here in this meeting, but I'd like to give a special shout out also to Leah, who really helps me to balance these two things in my mind during our few Skype sessions together. I'm an ex-PWS on the one hand, despite the fact that I'm still working to reduce speech fears and anxiety. It's not a disability to be nervous was the main thing that I got from those sessions. That's allowed. Similarly, as a recovering perfectionist, I'm learning to improve my speech while at the same time embracing its inherent messiness and imperfections. That's just part of communication. Even with this speech, I decided to resist the urge today to go over my speech or to make edits. And the next time I give a SAM talk, I hope to be less reliant on my notes as a crutch, since I'm currently reading full sentences. I'm going to hopefully just do bullet points next time around. All those years ago, I told Ed that I couldn't help but stutter. And in hindsight, there was some truth to that statement. I couldn't help the fact that I ended up in that circumstance with those bad speech habits because I didn't know better. But it's also true that I could help whether I stayed in that circumstance. And I thank God I eventually decided not to. I've come to learn firsthand that the thing that's more important than the circumstance that you're in is what you choose to do about it. I believe that there is still that younger John from primary school within me who is confident and loves the attention of people, turning around to hear him speak, the entertainer who wants to give the people what they came for. Me. As I continue on this speech journey, I'm learning to love to speak again by taking opportunities like this when they arise, and by trying to be more consistent in applying the lessons learned from these books. With my time, I'd like to learn more about the mind and how we can use the power of the mind within us to change how we relate to our circumstances, in keeping with my faith position that human beings are made in the image of God. I aspire to someday soon actually, study a PhD in the philosophy of psychiatry to understand and then challenge paradigms concerning how we conceptualize mental problems like speech impediments and speech anxiety. I hope to prove the value of the psychological interventions mentioned in these books, and to explore what it means about human psychology and how we can use that to inform better approaches to psychiatric care and treatment. I'm grateful to you, Lee, for your labor of love and for this community. It's great to be in community with each of you. May God bless your selflessness, Lee, and the important work that you do. I'm grateful for it, and I hope that each of you who've attended this meeting and those of you that are listening to the recording gain something from my story. Thank you very much, and God bless.